Picture this. A man is kneeling in a dry field. His palms are thick with calluses. His back is bent from years of labor. The sun leans heavily on his shoulders, and the smell of oxen, sweat, and soil clings to him like memory. This is not a prophet. This is Elisha before everything changed. There's no fire in the sky, no halo of divine light, just a man in the dust. And then a shadow falls across him. A figure stands beside the plow. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to, because what he does next changes everything. He takes off his cloak and throws it over Elisha's back. The mantle, not just a garment, a symbol, a call, a yoke. And without a word, Elisha turns and walks away. What would you do? You're a man with land, with a family, with oxen and bread and a future you can predict. And suddenly, without invitation, a stranger demands your life. Elisha doesn't hesitate. He slaughters the oxen, burns the plow, kisses his parents goodbye, because sometimes God doesn't ask politely. Sometimes he burns the exit. But what Elisha did not know, what he could not know, was what that mantle would cost to. Elisha was not a prophet in peace. He was hunted, hated, hounded into caves. He challenged kings. He called down fire. He raised the dead. He walked alone. He was not just holy, he was haunted. And Elisha followed him. He became a servant, a student, a shadow. And every step he took behind Elijah taught him this. Being called by God is not an escape from suffering. It is often a sentence to it. He watched his master tremble with despair beneath the broom tree. He saw a man who could command the heavens cry out that he wanted to die. And then came the last walk. They passed through Gilgal, then Bethel, then Jericho, and finally to the Jordan. Everywhere they went, people whispered, "Do you know your master will be taken from you today?" And Elisha said the same thing every time. "I know." Be silent, not because he didn't care, but because he couldn't bear to say it out loud. At the river's edge, Elijah struck the water with his cloak, and the river parted. The two walked through on dry ground, just as Moses once did, just as Joshua once did. And then Elijah turned and asked, "What do you want me to do for you before I'm taken?" And Elisha, who could have asked for peace or security or escape, said, "Let me inherit a double portion of your spirit." Not power, not glory, but the full weight of what it means to carry fire inside your bones. Elijah said, "You've asked for a hard thing, but if you see me when I am taken, it will be yours." And then it happened. A chariot of fire appeared, horses of flame, a whirlwind. And Elijah was gone. No grave, no goodbye, just flame and silence. Elisha tore his clothes. He screamed. He held the cloak of his master in his hands and wept. And in that moment, the boy who had once plowed fields became something else. Not just a prophet, but a man alone with the voice of God in his head and the weight of heaven on his back. He struck the Jordan with the cloak. The waters parted, and the watching prophets bowed. But make no mistake, this was not triumph. It was trauma. Elisha did not rise from the river with joy. He walked out drenched in grief. He had not just witnessed the miraculous. He had lost the only man who understood him. He walked away not with a crown, but with a wound. And that is the shadow that follows him into Bethel. This is the man who, not long after this moment of divine inheritance, will stand before a crowd of laughing children and speak a curse that will summon death from the woods. Not because he is evil, not because he is insane, but because he is something far more dangerous. He is chosen. And being chosen by God is often the loneliest, most terrifying thing a man can be. Picture this. A road winds through the hills of ancient Samaria, cracked and sun-beaten. The rocks on its edge are pale and blistered, and the air hums with heat. It is a forgotten place, ordinary in its dust, ancient in its silence. And along that road walks a man. He is not tall. He is not regal. There is no crowd to greet him, no procession, no parade. Only the quiet crunch of sandals against gravel, and the breath of a prophet who has seen too much too soon. Elisha is alone. He is on his way to Bethel. And Bethel is not what it once was. Long ago it had been holy. It was here that Jacob had dreamed of a ladder stretching into heaven, where angels ascended and descended, and the voice of God thundered promises into the night. He called the place Bethel, the house of God. But the house had grown cold, centuries past. And now Bethel had become something else, corrupt, profane, infested with idol worship. Jeroboam, the rebellious king of the northern tribes, had erected one of the infamous golden calves here. He named it Yahweh, but shaped it like Egypt. He told the people to bow to it, to kiss it, to call it God. And the people obeyed. They built shrines and temples. They appointed false priests. They taught their children to kneel before metal instead of majesty. The house of God had become a den of blasphemy, and it is into this den that Elisha walks. He does not come with weapons. He does not bring soldiers. He is no commander of armies, but he carries something more dangerous than swords. The voice of the Lord, and the people of Bethel know it, even the children, especially the children. They hear that a man is coming, a bald man, a prophet, a disciple of the dreaded Elijah. And so they gather, not in honor, but in mockery. They don't understand who he is, not really. They do not know what it is to bury a mentor in the sky. They don't see the grief in his eyes or the thunder in his soul. They only see his head, bald, shining, an easy target. And so they laugh. Maybe they're not children, not in the way we imagine. The word used in the Hebrew text can mean youths, adolescents, even young men. Old enough to know better. Old enough to hate. There are many of them. At least 42. Possibly more. They swarm him. They surround him. They chant. "Go up, you baldhead! Go up, baldhead!" It echoes like a curse. But what does it mean? Go up. They are not merely teasing. They are not just children being cruel. They are mocking the miracle. Just days ago, Elijah had been taken uplifted into heaven in a chariot of fire. And now they jeer, daring Elisha to do the same. Go up, prophet. Prove yourself. Disappear. As if miracles were tricks. As if holiness were a game. And then, bald head. It sounds petty, harmless, but it is not. In the ancient world, to be bald was a sign of shame. Often, it was a mark of judgment, of leprosy, of exile. To call someone bald-head was to strip them of dignity, to declare them cursed. This was not a schoolyard taunt. This was a public humiliation. And yet, it was more than that. It was a challenge. These young men, children of idolatry, raised in mockery, were not mocking a man. They were mocking the God who had chosen him. They were spitting on the fire that had just fallen from heaven. They were cursing the cloak that had split the Jordan. And Elisha stopped. He turned. And the air changed. There was no thunder, no fire, just stillness. And in that stillness, Elisha opened his mouth and cursed them. Not in rage, not in vengeance, but in the name of the Lord. That's what makes this moment tremble. This was not a man lashing out. This was a prophet speaking judgment, a divine curse. And creation itself responded. From the thickets, the branches, the silence, came the bears. Picture this. The children are still laughing. The sun is high. The road is bare. Dust dances at their heels. And Elisha has just cursed them. He doesn't raise his hands. He doesn't scream. He doesn't reach for a sword. He simply speaks. And the sky listens. The trees listen. And something ancient, something buried in the thickets, begins to stir. From the edge of the road, where the wilderness gnaws at the border of the city, branches crack, leaves shudder. And then, a sound that doesn't belong, heavy, guttural, living growls. The laughter stops. From the shadows lurch two figures, massive, wild, untamed. They do not walk like cattle or deer. They move low, with their shoulders rolling like waves. Their snouts glisten. Their claws dig into the dirt. They are female bears. And they are hungry. The Bible doesn't say their names. It doesn't give them purpose or poetry. They are not symbols. They are not metaphors. They are real, and they come with a mission. Not sent by Elisha, not summoned like demons in a ritual, but loosed unleashed by something greater, by judgment, by heaven itself. And they do what wild things do when they are provoked and released. They attack. There is no dignity in what happens next. Only chaos, only carnage. The children scream, they run. But they are too many, too slow, too surprised. The bears do not hunt with precision. They maul, they tear, they thrash. The Bible uses a word you cannot soften. Vatabaki, they were torn. Not merely injured, not merely killed, ripped open, flesh from bone, skin from muscle, voices from throats. The road runs red. There is no record of parents arriving. No funerals described, just blood. And silence. The number is precise, 42. But that's only the bodies counted. There may have been more. More screams lost to the air. More witnesses running through Bethel's alleys in horror. Try to hold the image. Try not to look away, because the Bible doesn't. It records it plainly, almost coldly, as if to say, yes, this happened. And now you must decide what to do with it. What kind of story is this? A cautionary tale? A punishment? A divine overreaction? Why bears? Why this? Why them? Some say the bears were just wild animals. Coincidence. A divine coincidence, maybe, but natural nonetheless. But Scripture doesn't paint it that way. Elisha cursed them in the name of the Lord, and the bears came. Not before, not days later. Immediately. Cause and effect. So we're left with the brutal truth. God didn't just allow this. He authored it. And that terrifies us. Because this isn't the God of soft sermons and gentle paintings. This is a God who responds to mockery with massacre. This is a God who lets bears run through children because they dared to sneer at the holy. This is the God of Sinai, of floodwaters, of fire from heaven, of firstborn sons dying in Egypt. This is the God who thunders, and when he chooses to act, nature itself obeys. We are used to stories that comfort us. We prefer a God who rescues, not one who ruins. But Scripture was not written to make us comfortable. It was written to make us see, to expose the chasm between what we are and what holiness demands. These boys did not just die because they were rude. They died because they mocked the sacred. They mocked the prophet. And a prophet is not merely a man. He is a mouthpiece of God. To curse a prophet is to curse the one who sent him. And there are consequences for that. Consequences written not in parables or poetry, but in torn flesh and broken silence. And after the blood, after the screams, after the last heartbeat stilled, Elisha turns and walks on. He does not gloat. He does not linger. He does not explain, because there is nothing to explain. He was not sent to be understood. He was sent to speak. And when he speaks, even the wild obey. Picture this. The road is empty now. The bodies lie still in the dust, and the air hangs heavy with silence, the kind that follows screaming, the kind that sticks to the skin. Elisha walks alone. No one follows him. No one dares. Behind him lies the echo of judgment. Before him lies the weight of his calling. And somewhere in that space, between horror and holiness, God is watching. This is the part of the Bible we pretend not to see, because it doesn't fit the image. We have painted God into something soft, a smiling shepherd holding a lamb, a gentle father with open arms, a therapist in the sky. But that's not the God who walked with Elisha. That's not the God who watched two bears tear through a crowd of mocking youth without a word of protest. The God of Bethel is not safe. He is not tame. He is not always merciful, and he never apologizes. This is not an accident in the biblical text. It is a warning, a flash of lightning in the heart of the Old Testament to remind us, God is not mocked. He is not a mascot. He is not an idea. He is not your friend until you feel better. He is I am holy, infinite, unapproachable. And when holiness is mocked, judgment answers. That's the part of God we've scrubbed out of the modern imagination. We've neutered him, dressed him in pastel. We sing of his love, but forget his wrath. We hold hands in church pews while ignoring that the same God who sent his son to die once sent she-bears to maul children. And what does that say? What do we do with that? Some will rage. They'll call it unjust, barbaric, a relic of ancient cruelty, and maybe ... it is horrifying. But maybe that's the point. Because horror wakes up what comfort puts to sleep. This story is not here to be explained away with commentaries and doctrinal disclaimers. It's here to disturb us, to remind us that God's holiness is not a metaphor. It is fire. It is storm. And when it comes near, nothing unclean survives. We are used to grace. We have lived long beneath its reign. But grace is not the absence of judgment. Grace is what keeps judgment from crushing us. And stories like this show us what the world looks like without it. The boys in Bethel were not just rude. They were raised in rebellion. They inherited a world that taught them to spit at the sacred. And they died not because they mocked a bald man, but because they mocked the line between man and God. They laughed at the chariot of fire. They sneered at the prophet's pain. They treated holy things as common. And the bears did not come to punish. They came to cleanse. Because sometimes holiness doesn't correct. It consumes. And that is the God Elisha served. Not a God who needs your approval, but a God who is. Picture this. A man walks away from a massacre. Not a soldier, not a king, not a tyrant, a prophet. And his hands are clean, because he did not lift a weapon. He did not throw a stone. He did not call down fire. He just spoke, and the bears came. Now the road stretches before him, dry and endless. The town of Bethel lies behind, its children silenced, its people stunned into stillness. No one follows. No one comforts. There are no disciples waiting at the gate, no songs sung in his honor. Only the hum of the wind, the faint rustle of leaves, and the unbearable weight of memory. Elisha walks on, alone. This is what we forget about prophets. We imagine them as pillars of power, men of fire and thunder, men who stand tall in crowds, who call down miracles like rain. But most of the time they walk alone, because to speak for God is to speak against the world. And the world does not applaud the truth. It crucifies it. Elisha has just inherited a double portion of Elijah's spirit. But what does that really mean? Double the visions? Double the wonders? No, double the weight. Double the sorrow. Double the loneliness of a man who hears heaven's voice in a world that mocks it. He has watched miracles unfold in silence. An axe head float, a boy raised from the dead, leprosy cleansed, armies struck blind. But before all of that came this. His beginning wasn't a revival. It was a reckoning. His first act wasn't to heal. It was to judge. And that judgment scarred him. You won't find Elisha talking about the bears again. He doesn't tell the story. He doesn't explain it. Because how do you explain something that you yourself don't fully understand? He didn't ask for bears. He didn't summon them. He spoke in the name of the Lord, and judgment came running out of the woods. And now he has to live with it. That's the secret of prophetic life. You don't just carry the words of God. You carry the aftermath. You carry the silence that follows. You carry the questions that never stop echoing. Did they deserve it? Did they know what they were doing? Could I have said nothing? Elisha doesn't answer these questions. The Bible doesn't let him. Because the story isn't about resolution. It's about revelation. It shows us that being chosen doesn't mean being comforted. Sometimes it means being shattered. Sometimes it means being the knife God uses and bleeding as you cut. And Elisha bleeds. You can hear it in the way he moves through the rest of his life. He performs miracles, but quietly. He confronts kings, but never rules. He dies alone, with no chariot of fire, no whirlwind, no final audience. Just a grave, and even in death, he is not done. Because years later, a dead man is thrown into Elisha's tomb, and when his body touches the prophet's bones, it comes back to life, as if even in decay, the fire inside him could not die. That is the kind of man Elisha was, a man with heaven in his marrow and sorrow in his steps. He did not ask to be remembered for bears, but that is how many will remember him. Not for mercy, not for healing, but for the day he cursed the laughter of mockers and silence answered. Picture this. You're not in ancient Israel anymore. You're standing in your room, Bible in hand, reading this story, and for a moment you feel something you didn't expect. Not comfort, not inspiration, but fear. A cold, creeping, quiet fear. Because you realize this isn't just a story about Elisha. It's a story about you. A mirror, held up to your face by the same God who once loosed bears from the woods. And it asks, what have you laughed at that was holy? What sacred things have you treated as common? What voices from God have you rolled your eyes at? What warnings have you dismissed as old-fashioned, outdated, embarrassing? Because that's what the boys of Bethel did. They weren't born blasphemers. They were raised in a city where mockery was normal, where false worship was tradition, where the name of Yahweh was whispered with contempt, if it was spoken at all. They didn't just stumble into sin. They were shaped for it, formed by a culture that taught them to laugh at fire, to scorn prophets, to jeer at anything that smelled like truth. And when Elisha walked into their world, he wasn't a threat to their bodies. He was a threat to their worldview. He was a living rebuke. A man who had seen the impossible and carried the weight of heaven on his back. And they hated him for it. So they laughed. Because laughter is the last defense of the guilty. It mocks what it cannot face. It belittles what it secretly fears. And God watched. And then he acted. Why? Why such severity? Why such horror? Because if God is truly holy, then mockery of that holiness is not harmless. It is cosmic treason. It is man spitting into the face of his Creator and calling it a joke. And the God of Elisha does not laugh along. He draws a line. And that line, though ancient, still runs through the world today. Through churches, through cities, through families, through you. It asks, do you revere the sacred, or do you mock it? Not with your words necessarily, maybe not with taunts or sneers, but with indifference, with casualness, with scrolling past truth to get to entertainment, with muting conviction and turning up distraction. The boys of Bethel didn't die because God hates children. They died because they embodied a culture that rejected the holy, and the God of fire answered. This story is not just about judgment. It's about warning. It's about what happens when God is pushed too far, when grace is trampled, when the patience of heaven expires. And perhaps the most terrifying thing is this. Elisha didn't call the bears. He didn't name them. He didn't command them. He only spoke a curse in the name of the Lord, and nature obeyed. That is the power of holiness. It bends the world around it. It moves animals, weather, history. It is not polite. It is not passive. It acts. And in this story, it acted through teeth and claws. But what about now? Does God still act like this? Does he still judge? Or has he gone quiet? That's the dangerous assumption of the modern world, that silence equals absence. That because he hasn't sent bears recently, he must have changed. But Scripture says he doesn't change. Not in Bethel. Not in Babylon. Not in your life. And one day, Scripture says, there will be another reckoning. Not on a dusty road in Israel, but across the whole earth. When mockers will no longer laugh. When the fire will fall again. Not in judgment of children, but of kingdoms. And on that day, you won't be watching Elisha. You'll be watching the skies. So the question is no longer why God sent bears. The question is, what will he send next?